rolling. Welcome to Unconventional Existence. My name is Father Joe, and I'm actually here with my two brothers today.
Father Joe.
Yep. It's something that they used to call me in high school.
Nice.
So last week I tried shooting an episode, and I realized something. I realized I was hiding a lot of what I was going through. A big thing I want this show to be about is vulnerability and truth. And when I felt myself holding back my truth last week, I felt my entire performance was off. Like I just wasn't able to connect with anybody because that connection was being distracted by what I was dealing with. So the last 3 weeks have been very difficult for all of us. These are my two brothers. This is Christopher. This is Anthony.
What's going on?
How you doing?
And I brought them here because we've all been kind of going through it. And by going through it, I also mean highs and lows. So we've had some incredible highs and we've had some incredible lows. And just being able to create a space to talk about it is kind of the goal of this show. So I guess we'll start off with what we found out first, which was Dad getting arrested.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny how it actually, how we all found out.
Well, I don't even remember finding out because I found out the day before my wedding.
Well, so
I was in.
We all found out
I was
the day before your wedding.
I was in such a high in my life that when I heard that, I had to take a step back and really figure out how I felt about it.
I mean, you probably took a while to even process it because of everything.
Because immediately it's all right. So I had to assume that my dad wasn't going to be at my wedding. But how did we find out about it?
So my girl was on the sheriff's county website
that's
and she was looking at all the mugshots and it's because his middle name is Anthony. It said Anthony Altieri first, and she was like, man, Anthony looks terrible.
But she's never met Dad.
No, never.
Yeah.
And she saw the picture and she sent it to me. I was like, oh my gosh, that's my dad.
Yeah.
And then I told everybody, and then it was kind of we went from there. And then he got out the morning of your wedding.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought he got out the day before.
Yeah, he was wearing the same
It was
shirt.
the morning of the wedding?
Yeah, he wore to the rehearsal dinner what he wore in jail.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Damn.
And
No, it was a different. He just likes those colors.
No, that's what he said. He wore that into the jail. He had other clothes. He decided to wear the same clothes.
I was in the middle of a road trip from New York to Florida, bringing my uncle to his wedding. And I found out over a phone call that was on speakerphone. So my uncle, which is my dad's brother, was in the car when I found out about this. And yeah, talk about not being able to really process anything. I felt like I was more trying to approach it empathetically and take Dad's side because I've been where Dad has been. I've not jail, but addicted to things that control my life and make me choose things that aren't necessarily the best for me.
So I will say this. I felt the same way. When he went into jail, before he had gone into jail, it was kind of, I still had that chip on my shoulder towards him just because of just the way he's treated Mom, really. But
for reference, my mom and dad are kind of divorced but live under the same house. It's a weird situation, but my dad cheated on my mom and he's never really talked about it. He only really likes to complain about why he did what he did, and it's because of somebody else, not him.
Right.
So that's what he's referring to when he says.
And that's just the beginning of it. Yeah, that's. But where is I going with that?
Oh, the way you feel towards Dad.
Right. Because he went into jail, and I was like, I don't want him to. I wanted to help him. That was the first instinct.
Mm-hmm.
So. I was so happy he was at the wedding. He wasn't really all there. I was, as soon as I got down the aisle, he was worried about, something completely irrelevant to the wedding. He's talking to me not about Sarah, and that's all I'm thinking about.
That was all you're concerned with, your bride.
All right. So that happened. And then as we were leaving, like Dad and I got into a little scruffle. We were leaving the hotel. I don't know if
I remember that.
What happened?
I don't. Gabrielle told you.
Yeah.
So Dad stuck around the hotel the entire time. Obviously, he doesn't have a ride. He's waiting for somebody.
Oh, do you talk about the next day?
The next day.
He called me and I was gonna I was like, hey, what's going on? And then he was like, you should know already that, like I shouldn't have to tell you that I need a ride. And I was like, all right, goodbye. Like I'm not.
He's basically,
He's almost expecting us to know what he needs.
He's expecting us to take care of him. And
which isn't the problem, folks. It's the non-communicative problem. He'll act like a victim until we ask him, and then literally say, "Oh, you didn't know? What do you think?" Like, or just kind of like this smart ass response.
He definitely he likes to gaslight. He's the king of gaslighting, unfortunately. But
I think both of our parents are, unfortunately.
But I've moved past that. Like he's not mentally all there.
And 100%. I learned a lot about dementia going into my recent job, which was working at the ARC. And once I learned what I did about dementia, I should do an episode on that, period. But it was very clear that Dad is suffering from something like dementia.
Whatever it is, it's something there.
Correct.
And
our grandfather passed away young. And he had dementia.
And you add in, doing drugs.
Mm-hmm.
That's only going to make it worse. But
a lot of times people do drugs to mitigate the dementia.
Right. But no, he made some smart remark about how
it wasn't a Catholic wedding.
No, basically it was along the lines of like nobody ever helps him. Like none of his kids ever help him. And it was a smart, sneaky remark. And I had just had it with him because he was just sticking around all day. I knew what he was doing. And I was like, Dad, you make us out to be these piece of shit children. And, we're not. So I don't know. I don't care what because at the end of the day, I know, number one, he's going to forget that conversation. And number two, like he truly thinks he's right in the situation.
That's why it's
he's at that point where he's
that's the hardest part about like anybody you have a problem with. Like nobody thinks they're wrong and like sticks to it. You know what I mean? Like nobody's gonna like it's. And he's a very rare breed.
He's not. He's at the point now where he could take care of himself and he could live a good life, but he chooses not to.
Well, both Mom and Dad choose not to. They choose the comfort of this toxic relationship over the fear that they experience when even thinking about something new.
But yeah,
what was that last part?
The fear that they experience when even thinking about like taking steps towards a divorce, and selling the house and splitting the money and living on their own. It's so foreign to them that they're petrified of it.
Well, it's because, this might be a little like off, but it's the situation they're in is who they are at the moment. So essentially, they're afraid to lose who they are, even though it's hurting.
You have to die on to self. Mm-hmm. And that's a really good point because it's almost their entire life is they're letting go of. Mm-hmm. What was it? How many years were they married?
36. Well, they're still married.
They're still married.
Still married.
I had this conversation recently. Like, this may be a weird thing to say, but I don't think their marriage was a failure. I think they raised eight kids, like in the sense of like a good marriage. Like they had like some good times. You know what I mean?
If you're listening to Alan Watts, absolutely, because basically the whole reason we marry is to have kids and raise them, and that's a spiritual view on it. It's not necessarily
the view. Like, no, that's how it is. It's because it's how I say it is. And it boils down to I'm right.
always. But so we could talk about my dad.
Yeah, let's get off that subject.
So there's a lot that's happened in these 3 weeks. So we experienced our brother's wedding, Anthony.
Hey. How you doing?
I had a fucking
blast. That wedding was fucking awesome, man.
I had a fucking blast.
We wound up staying in a hotel for the weekend, like the entire weekend, bro. I remember writing it down in my journal.
That's awesome.
I am just so grateful for the intense lows and those intense highs that we experienced within 48 hours of each other. And little did I know it was going to keep fucking happening for the next 3 weeks. But
yeah, sorry about that, man, because I was able to escape.
I mean, hell yeah, dude. You're on your honeymoon. You're supposed to. Like, that's the whole point. And that's why I didn't mention anything to you.
Right. Well, I didn't want to. The first thing I heard was from Sarah's mom, because now mom and Sarah's mom are.
But I'd rather her hear from.
I love Sarah's mom.
Yeah. I like that you heard from Sarah's side instead of ours.
Yeah, I guess you could look at it that way.
I just didn't want to burden you with that on your honeymoon. The whole point is to escape. So
yeah, I didn't want. To me, it's like I didn't want her. Like I wanted her disconnecting from her mom.
Correct.
It's not anything having to do with my side, but I got over that.
So yeah. Shit. I just lost it. Where were we?
Come back.
We're talking about the highs at my wedding.
Oh yeah, and then like just being with my girlfriend Kelly, even with you and
Claudia Bear.
Claudia, like we just all had so much fun, and it was an intimate, small wedding. Like, how did you like,
dude?
How did you like the wedding? Let's put it that way.
I will say, like looking back at it, I was very nervous. Yeah. Very, very nervous. I might have showed signs, but like. Knowing myself, like I was doing shit I don't normally do. Like that, when we got ready, bro, that I was like freaking out.
I left.
Freaking out. And this guy leaves.
Best man.
The best man.
I came back.
Former Marine. I'm sorry. You're never a former Marine.
That's all right. That's right.
But literally abandons his post. Don't talk to old Claudia.
There was multiple times that day where the post was abandoned, bro, but that's okay.
I lost my speech. I had to wing that speech. That was a good speech.
That was a good speech. It was a comedy bit, bro.
Once she walked out, once I saw her, that was it. It was just like the time of our life for the next 2.5 weeks.
You guys were both glowing. Like, yeah. And
bro, you're crying pretty hard. You're like...
I've been to like 3 weddings this year, and yours was the only wedding that really felt like
a ceremony
meant for each other.
Yeah, like a wedding.
Like I felt in 100% support of you because I feel as if a lot of my friends are making premature mistakes in relationships, and I just don't feel that way about you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man.
And I love you and Sarah
I knew
have
she was
grown
a while ago
so much emotionally and just matured.
Right.
Is really all it is.
And we're not done.
It's never done. It's never done. So we have the beautiful high of his wedding, but within that wedding, we did get some off news about one of our siblings, and she was lost and unable to make it to the ceremony. And then 2 days later, or was it 3? It might have been 3 days later, we wind up having to Baker act her and put her in a facility to snap out of a state of psychosis. This was something
for the third time.
For the third time. Well, second time in a month, and third time in the last 2-3 years.
Yeah.
So she's been really going through it, and my heart goes out to her.
I mean, she's doing much better now.
Correct, 100%.
She's back. She's out. She's home. But yeah, that week was definitely a rough week. I didn't really. I was talking to you about this. I didn't really have the grace that I did like last time. Like I was super like impatient. I didn't have the language like I did last time to like communicate with her.
And I also just want to clarify. Each one of us have been Baker acted and been sent to a facility to be forced to be evaluated. I don't like the way I said that a bunch of times.
Multiple times for me.
And for me.
And for you.
And for...
No, you were only once.
Chris but I was in there for 3 weeks, man.
Well, you were in there a while, too.
I was in there.
I was the only one that was in and out.
Yes. I was.
Well, because I kept trying to tell the doctors. I was like, listen.
I was also the youngest out of everybody.
Yeah, doing that at 18.
I was 19.
100%.
19, 20. So I was like, I'm still a kid, but I was very much a kid back then, and I was scared.
So the reason why I'm mentioning this is because for me, other than leaving the Catholic Church, being hospitalized and being forced to be hospitalized has been one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. So whenever I'm put back into a situation where I have to deal with either someone who needs to be Baker acted or like even questioning my own sanity, all of the triggers get brushed upon and rise to the surface. And I noticed this time it doesn't really happen as everything is unfolding. It happens the second you're able to like sit down and process shit. Like there was just so much fear and just doubt in my own capabilities of what I know about mental health in general. Like when someone you love is going through or goes into a state of psychosis, it's undescribable.
Right.
Like, if we were to try to,
especially when you know what that state is like.
The only way you really understand what that state is like is if you've been through it.
And that's why.
Yeah, like it's funny, like when we were joking the other day, when you were like, if they want to act like this, like that, that's not how it works.
Well, what I did was I just pretended to be my parents' perspective.
Yeah.
And that was something that they told me about almost jumping off of
the balcony?
Yeah.
I held you back there.
You saved my life.
I saved your life.
You saved his legs.
Dude, but that was, how old are you then?
We're joking about this, but this was very, very serious.
And for me, it was serious, bro. I had to hold you back from jumping. What do you mean?
I was 24.
So I was 18.
Peter was born.
I was 18. So I should have known that you were really fine. Or do you think you were going to jump? Because
I wanted to.
I think it was more of a statement for you.
I definitely, and me and the doctor talked about it. It was more about me verbalizing how I feel inside and wanting to show them, like, this is what you're doing to me.
Right.
And if this keeps happening, like,
right. Yeah.
I will welcome death like an old friend.
Yeah.
And when I realized, like, I was hanging my wellness and happiness on their opinions of me is when I realized I needed to shift.
Right. Yeah.
And that's when I disconnected completely for a couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah, and I knew that only because it was something that I had struggled with, and we had talked about it previously. Like that was something, you know, actually holding you back, and you explained that exact thing. So,
all right, so she was in the hospital. Chris, I want like people to try to understand what it's like experiencing someone going through a state of psychosis, and being that we've all been through it, maybe just kind of speak our own perspectives, not necessarily what you were living with our sibling when it happened.
Yeah.
So you can give us a little bit of like the symptoms that you saw and then talk about maybe how you saw it in yourself.
First I can like say like what it's like to like be in that state. And it's essentially like you forget. It's similar to like how I imagine dementia to be. Like you
or tripping. We've always said it's tripping. Identical to literally tripping, but not doing any drugs.
It's a bad trip.
Correct. Well, mine, see, this is where ours differ. Mine was not. Mine was very like spiritual and very connected to a larger thing, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like mine was super like spiritual, but I kept trying to hold on to like those, like, you know how you like see a lot of truth like in that state, like very heavy stuff that you can't hold on to. Like, cause it's, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you can't use it essentially. And that's what I think of like what it means to hold on to anything is essentially use it for something else instead of like take it for face value. With that being said, it could send you down like just this loop of like until eventually you get to a place where you don't know who you are, what you're doing, how to do it. And depending on how hard you hang on, it could take you'll forget how to breathe. Like you forget how to walk.
Alan Watts puts it perfectly. It's like you become God, but in a way that you don't quite comprehend. It's like you think you control everything, and you think your decisions. Like it's a crazy state of really believing that you're God, but not understanding that
what it means to be like it.
Or rather, you're going based off of that understanding of what a God is.
Yeah.
So, like, we were raised Catholic, so you thought you were the
king of the universe.
Judeo-Christian God, like Judeo-Christian God, however you pronounce it.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember that specifically, that state, like, of realizing I'm this God, but not realizing it's something I can't control, just like the breathing.
Like, essentially, like, when you find yourself in such a place, like, of, like, spiritual, like, fruition, I didn't realize how important it was to surrender.
For me, it was...
Like, surrender everything.
Kind of surrender, because we were, brought up that Catholic way. For me, it was like surrendering, kind of that belief, like that... I don't know.
It's hard. It's like...
Well, because it's hard to... Yeah.
I like how Ramdas puts
quantify it.
Ramdas explains, like, how, like, people will find themselves in those states, and he's like, you have to remember, you can't bring your ego with you. Like...
Yeah, it's that...
Because those two states counteract each other. Like, they can't... Like, you're going to tear yourself apart. Yeah. But anyways, furthermore, so... Seeing somebody go into that sort of, like, state, it's hard because, like, you... Like, I just didn't really know what to do. Like... As far as, like...
Well, she was also tricky because it was like, it was like, is she in psychosis or is she not in psychosis?
Is she coming out of it?
Like, what's going on? Whereas, like, with you guys, it was fucking clear as day. Like, when did I die?
For me, like, I knew that there were certain things that were being done on her end. What happened was inevitable. But, like,
100%.
There was nothing that I was getting married, bro. I couldn't really invest myself in that situation.
But even someone who did.
Everything that I was hearing and everything that I knew was happening, it was inevitable she was going to go through this. And I haven't even spoken to her or talking to her like my own self. And, like, that's on me. But
I don't think you've had the time to really process it because of the high you've been on, which is well deserved.
Yeah.
Because... Yeah, like I said, a beautiful moment happened, and I was so happy to be a part of it. And she wasn't there because of all this. And it's like, shit, like I could have, hopefully helped, but can't think like that, right? I mean, I like to believe that we don't have any control of what happens other than how we react.
Yeah.
So, Jacqueline missing your wedding happened 1,000 times over, and will always happen again. In the sense of. That's just how the universe unfolded for us.
Right. But yeah, it's definitely hard to deal with. But there's certain things when you're coming out of that state that you can do that if you do it correctly, that you really shouldn't. Well, at least I personally haven't struggled with going back yet.
And what do you think that is?
I think it's 3 things. Like mainly, like it's definitely not medication in the long term, but it's medication in the short term.
Well, it's especially if you crack. Like if you are in a deep state of psychosis,
like if it becomes physical at that point.
It was apparent that she was never fully out of it from the very beginning. Just talking to her, that wasn't her. We all know her, so that's why it's so easy to see. But medication, physical health, and you have to like. Also talk about it in like some way. Like there has to be some kind of therapy, it doesn't have to be professional therapy.
No, it's just
I think
expressing.
The biggest thing in my opinion coming out of it, like, is to be 100, because for a lot, like a big pillar of the loop you go in is you're trying to hide from yourself. Like you're trying, like in the sense that like, it wasn't until I was completely honest about everything I was going through with myself. Like I had to finally admit to myself that this isn't right.
Like there's things on the surface that she is dealing with or that we think she's dealing with, but there's stuff way deeper down that she's never even expressed to us that she needs to deal with.
Correct. But she might not even be aware of how much it affects her.
Exactly. So she's still getting there. And
the story of trauma and the toll it takes, because I believe our family specifically have all been traumatized right off the bat, like with the car accident that we experienced when we were kids.
That's my first memory.
But
I don't know if it's a made-up memory.
Even trauma like... oh, guys. He's cracking. Yeah, we were all traumatized, and then not being able to learn how to cope with emotions on top of it. Everything just kept getting built upon trauma.
And then not to mention like growing up in a faith that emphasizes how important, how you're wrong. Like,
or rather, suffering leads to freedom.
Yeah. Like, I like how Alan Watts puts it, like how essentially guilt is the Catholic Church's highest virtue. Like they turn it into a virtue. And I feel like that's a recipe for disaster once you finally,
especially learning this at ages fucking 8, 9, 10, and then like making that the foundation of your life.
Right.
Like, that was my life. Like, I wanted to be a priest, so like feeling the guilt and shame for what I do was necessary. To reach.
Even
sainthood.
Just disconnecting from the Catholic Church alone is enough to put you through a loop, because it's literally everything you believed in, like just kind of turned sideways a little bit. Not completely upside down, but.
I mean, I would say completely upside down because,
well, it takes you. Sorry.
It's a pendulum. So, or black and white. It went from black to white. I still didn't really understand the gray yet, and
like you threw the baby out with bathwater.
Exactly.
But there's so much truth still in
100%
in what even any religion teaches.
That's why I'm a student of all religions, not just one or lack of none.
Yeah, it's
whatever. But shit, I lost it.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. It's, believing in something bigger than yourself kind of thing.
100%.
At least for me.
And now I'm about like it's a little different than it was. But back then when it happened, being the most traumatic thing that happened, it did snap me into a state that was the exact opposite.
Right. But that was then, and this is now. How do you feel now?
About what in particular?
I don't know. I would say God.
Well, sorry to cut you in there.
Yeah.
For a long time, I didn't think it really affected me, like the Catholic upbringing. But then I started listening to Sam Harris, and I was like, "What the fuck did they do?"
Sam Harris is the one.
It was just such a struggle, like because we, like you said, we were brought up. This is it.
And we believe, make no mistake, folks, we loved our religion. We were involved in youth group.
All the way up until high school, everything.
Like we were heavily involved, the whole family. Rosary every night, praying. Like it was I'm very grateful for it and lucky that we had that structure.
Right.
But it was all built around religion. Like if we didn't, I remember Dad literally saying, if we don't have faith, we have nothing to talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
And from that moment, this was years before he did what he did. Well, who knows? This was years before everything came to the surface with my dad. And our relationship, both my mom and my dad, are not, I wouldn't say they're relationships. They're more of acquaintances, unfortunately. And that is not my choice. That is by the choices that they make. And I accept that. It's just, every time I realize how far back it goes, it kind of hurts.
Far back what goes again?
The split in the relationship, because it was even before I split religions. It was really the day they took Joe Guadagnino's side. We'll cut that name.
Well, I remember we used to talk on the driveway like...
Oh, I remember that, bro. Joey had you had it rough with our parents.
It broke me in a way that I can't describe, and... from that moment on, I have always kept myself and my real self masked up around them.
Yes, but I would say that you never really needed to. Wait, what did you say again?
I had to mask up.
Yeah,
now I don't.
But that's what I'm saying. Why I don't. It's a mask that didn't need to be there.
See, I disagree, because when I would come to mom and dad about these ideas that weren't religious, like I got called crazy. Mom thought I fucking had a fucking worm inside me.
Wait, when was that?
Making me crazy. She's like, you went to England, you could have a parasite.
Jesus.
And I'm like, are you kidding me? Just because I don't believe in this religion? And I understand it. It was a very radical change in a very small short amount of time. But it's because I understand.
Yeah.
Anyways.
I don't know. I definitely think because you felt like you had that mask on, there's probably been a communication barrier with you guys over the years. Like, you guys just can't talk about stuff.
So I think like
if something bothers me with mom, I'm telling her it bothers me.
Yeah, I don't.
Or I just, if a topic of conversation like that comes up.
I guess I know that if I'm in her presence long enough, something will bother me. So I just never give her the time.
It's a trigger. Mm-hmm. So that's, you got to avoid triggers. That's another thing for psychosis.
Yeah, speaking of which, it's everything crazy. But moving on. So when we did the episode last week, this was the Sunday after the wedding. I literally tried acting like I was okay, trying to do a podcast. But even my focus in the podcast was so overcome by anxiety, unknowing that anxiety was coming from the situations that I was experiencing.
Right.
But because as you're going through it, you kind of don't realize what's affecting you and what's not until I addressed it. So this week was about to be this week I was going to address those events, but then these last 3 days, I've been consumed with another loved one who suffers from alcoholism. And for the fourth time in 2 years, there's been a serious incident. And this time we wound up having to go to the court and get a Merchant Act. And what that is when a loved one or a guardian goes to the court and speaks for the person who is either intoxicated or incapable of making conscious decisions on their own. And they have a judge sign, because we tried to get the cops there, but the cops, all they saw was someone trying to hide under the sheets. They could not do anything. Legally, they were not able to take him because he wasn't a threat to himself in the moment. He wasn't a threat to anybody else in the moment. He was just wasted. And we weren't going to have him arrested for anything. So they weren't able to do anything. Next day, we got the Merchant Act, and I wind up being at the house with him when it all happens and talk about triggers, because I got Baker acted after the balcony incident, and 3 days later, I get released, and I call my brother to come pick me up, not knowing that he was trapping me.
Oh yeah, that's right. Dude, I didn't know either. I got my brother pinched.
We didn't know. Mom didn't tell us.
Oh God, I just remember you guys.
It's because I asked Mom. The whole reason was because it was still their car, so I had gotten in trouble in the past for taking the car out, so I had to let her know where I was going. Should have just lied.
Bro, Anthony told me we were getting food, and he brought me to the hospital.
No, I offered it. Didn't we get Taco Bell or something?
You were in Boston, bro. So Christopher was the only one that it's happened out of state. And holy shit.
Chris was in it.
I was the one that noticed over the phone, and
bro, I used to ride the trains God,
I was so fucking worried, bro, because you were on a suicidal aspect of it.
Oh God, what was I was sounding like it?
Yes,
I didn't even notice that.
Worried about suicide more than anything with you.
Yeah, you were, because you were saying just so many different things that we were just praying that didn't come across your mind in a serious way, because you were in the state where that kind of stuff happens.
Yeah, it was terrifying.
For all of us. And I remember telling you.
And I wonder if it's not uncommon for people getting out of the military to go through that, because like I said, it's a lot of you're shedding who you were.
But think about it. How many suicides are in the military?
Yeah, dude, it's sickening. I don't even want to get into the Marine Corps and the military and what it does to people.
Yeah.
And how little is known about it.
I don't even think it's so much I think it's more of because that's who you are for 5 years, 4 years, however long. You become somebody else, and then you're like a fish out of water when you get back into, especially Boston. It was completely different. I felt I would
yelled at on subways.
Well, no, not even that. Like, I was just sitting in class and like I would like talk to like a classmate and it was like I was speaking a different language. They're like, "Are you okay?" Like,
dude, it's traumatic to anybody who goes through 5 years of getting to know people like your brothers and then dozens of them are just taking their lives.
yeah.
That is not an okay experience. And that's violence taken out of the whole aspect. Like, that's just one thing.
Yeah.
And then not to mention the fact that boot camp is designed to break every part of your identity down to make you a part of the whole.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is a traumatizing experience that we inflict on every single Marine. Because I don't think any other branch is that extreme.
Yeah.
Well, I remember telling you, I found myself like, because like when you're getting in a stage of like getting like your identity stripped, you cling to anything. I remember thinking to myself in boot camp, I was like, I'm Italian. Like, I used to.
You're trying to cling on to something?
Like, yeah, like I was like, I'm Italian, like you just need like that flair of like something that's like who you are. And it's like, something even small, like it's just funny like to think about. I was thinking about that recently.
But yeah, it's
whatever little bit of
like
identity.
Like even something
that's not the Marine Corps.
Speaking of that, what was with the New York Italian accent during the best man speech at the wedding, bro? You were
wasted, dude. He only does it when he's wasted.
Bro, you sounded like you were straight out of the Bronx.
No way. We were talking to Uncle Tommy.
Born and raised in Tampa. Born and raised in Tampa, and he sounds like he's fresh out of the Bronx.
I was like, hey, how's it going?
You were like a speech that was gonna make you cry.
He's like, I lost the speech. You believe that?
No way.
Who is this kid?
Dude,
bro, it was funny.
It was like a comedy bit.
It was a comedy bit.
It was literally a comedy bit.
Dude, I didn't even know I sounded like that.
Yeah, you were really like,
talking like this.
You believe that?
Sounded like you just got done talking to Uncle Tommy.
It was so funny, but both of our parents have very strong accents. It's amazing we don't sound like that actually.
And it's crazy because I don't hear it anymore until someone
right,
like my brother-in-law is like, "What are you talking about?" Right to her face, right to my mom's face. He's making fun of her accent, and I died laughing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Yeah, it's been a crazy 3 weeks, and I'm really glad that we have a relationship that we've been able to talk about this stuff openly.
Oh yeah,
because I think that's the biggest key in really being able to deal with this shit is being able to talk about all these feelings that we don't necessarily understand until we have a point of reference, orientation. If
it's
you will.
very true. It's very true.
So, but
people aren't lucky enough to have multiple siblings that they can count on. I definitely feel very lucky that I have you guys. So
Big time.
like me, like when everything was happening to me.
Oh God.
Well, that's I found out that was my biggest trigger, man. Is like so
You
I
didn't
wrote
have siblings at the time?
I wrote in my journal the day we Merchman acted my brother-in-law, and the thing that made me most upset was as I was going to be that person that I needed when I was going through that situation, I realized I didn't have that person.
Right.
And just remember feeling so alone. I remember feeling such anguish and despair because like I didn't have that person to talk to. I had to figure all this shit out by myself, and I didn't trust anybody, especially professionals, because they all have an alternative motive. Like they all also, not necessarily an alternative motive, but
they're going off a book that was written 30 years ago. What is it? The diagnostic manual, like
the DSM.
DSM-2, right?
I think we're on DSM-6 now.
God. It's got 6 times as bad. Like,
and all it is a book of symptoms. And if you have multiple, you gotta be something. Something's gotta be wrong with you. But literally, they're only describing the ways that we react to trauma and lack of secure attachments and an inability to talk about what's going on inside.
Yeah. And they just, want you to take the medicine.
Yeah. And that's all they do. That's all they want you to do. Check the time.
Which the medicine helps, but
I don't think it's supposed to be permanent. Like
I don't think it should be permanent for anybody. No, unfortunately. But
so my opinion on medicine is, if we are looking at the brain and we know exactly what the brain needs, and it's this medication, 100%. And Dr. Amen talks about it because he does these.
It's lack of blood flow to certain areas of the brain, right?
Well, it's damage to the brain, which is lack of blood flow. Like certain parts aren't working like they should, lack of minerals, lack of vitamins, stuff like that. And he's been studying it for I think 20 years now, and he has the largest database of brain scans. And he himself says, why are we still prescribing meds without looking at the brain when we know certain brains react to meds this way and we know certain meds react to this way? But no, we are still guessing. Yep. We are still in a corporate or a system that is basing their diagnosing and prescriptions off of guesswork.
Yep.
And that's what sickens me the most. Because we don't have to. Like, up until I read Dr. Amen's stuff, I was very against medicine. Like, no, like, I'm not for it. But when he shows me proof of, like, how this medicine needs, or this type of brain scan needs this medicine, and 6 months later, their fucking brains look like nothing has ever happened to it.
Yeah.
That's what mind boggles me. Because there is mental illness, but it's all based on the health of our brain.
Yeah.
Not on a diagnosis that cripples us for the rest of our life.
And it's literally like psychiatry is literally you talking to the doctor and he has to make the assumption of what's going on.
It's a fucking
like
survey.
It would take years to understand exactly how. And that's how long they want you to go for. But you can get that, I feel like you can get that just talking to anybody.
Well, the whole thing is when we're traumatized, we don't have the ability to talk about it to anybody. So it's a symptom of trauma is isolating yourself with the trauma, unable to talk about it to anybody. It's a sick cycle.
And the side effects are a very real thing in the
long term.
No, even in the short term, like I don't know. Some of the medications I took definitely made me feel more outside of myself than they did.
I agree.
I was on Risperidone in the hospital.
I experienced firsthand like them trying to find the right medicine for me because the stuff that they were giving me was making me go crazy. I am not on anything. I haven't been on anything for 6 years, and I haven't had a single mental break.
I haven't been on anything. I think it's the same. 7 years, 8 years, maybe. No, 7 because Peter was
Johnny's wedding. Is the last time I stopped after his wedding.
No. I don't know. I don't know the last time I Oh yeah, it was 2017. It was the Merchant Act.
7 years ago.
Yeah, it was the Merchant Act because that was when the doctor was like, "You're not bipolar. Like, you have a serious case of ADHD, and I suggest you get checked out for autism."
Yeah.
But I think we're gonna wrap it up. That was very
fruitful.
Very nice.
Thank
you guys so much for joining me. I'm Father Joe.
Oh yeah, brother.
If you guys are struggling with anything, reach out to the ones that were the black sheep. They'll know how to help you through it because this shit's not easy, and it's definitely not easy to do alone. And I just want to help people, and I hope this helps people. So, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Hell yeah. Thanks for listening.
Wrap it up.